Yo, if you're after a platform adventure game, then Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time is probably one of the biggest games amongst that genre that you may have to grab now. I personally have to give the folks at Toys for Bob a ton of credit for the guts that they've shown in this particular game. They've basically wiped the slate clean after Crash Bandicoot 3, and this game serves as something of a sequel and also a soft reboot. I have definitely had a great time so far playing Crash Bandicoot 4 for the most part. It definitely is a pretty decent game. But just like the original 3 games that this follows, it definitely has a few things that really irritated me. So let's run through 5 things I hate about this game.
Number 1.
Crash Bandicoot 4 has a ton of variety to the game. One thing that has been added here is the ability to rail slide. It is actually a pretty major aspect of the gameplay, and many levels do use this particular style. When you are sliding along a 2D plane, I do find it is fine for the most part, but there are some levels where it is more 3D and the camera tries to be a little bit too dynamic for my liking. Whilst it does look cool, it can be rather frustrating at times, as it's not always easy to tell where you are or where you will land in relation to an object on the rail. I've personally died multiple times just trying to figure out whether I'm supposed to duck, jump, or move to another rail, etc. I don't hate this aspect of the game by no stretch, but it can be very annoying.
Number 2.
As someone who isn't an expert with the whole Crash Bandicoot series, I probably would go as far to say that the Crash Bandicoot games have never really been easy, and Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time, in my opinion, definitely follows that trend. I will say that the number of frustrating moments in this game are definitely far less than the Insane trilogy. However, Toys for Bob clearly were being a little bit on the mean side with some of the aspect of the game design. So for example, this level where I'm trying to change the platform to a solid state whilst jumping nearly made me go crazy with the amount of times that I died. It's like the game design choices or game mechanics were just fighting against me to get past this particular section of the game. Even for me, some of the boss battles were crazy. I don't expect boss fights to be a walk in the park, but trust me, unless you've got the controls down to the T, they're definitely going to make you throw your control pad out of the window with the amount of frustrating moments you do get, especially due to some of the game design choices.
Number 3.
Maybe this kind of coincides with the first gripe that I had with the game in terms of perception, and this may be a little bit on a nitpick side, but this is definitely something that can get annoying. The camera for the most part of the game isn't too bad, but there are a few occasions though where you cannot actually really see in front of you, and this is especially true for the sections when you are running towards the camera. It can be dealt with, but when the camera for the most part of the game is pretty decent, you really do notice it when it is not where it should be.
Number 4.
Load times are something that has just gotten worse and worse this console generation, and Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time has some pretty lengthy ones in the game. To be fair, this game does look really great, and especially with the inverted mode, which is one of the best looking parts of the game I've seen in such a long time. So I do obviously get the fact that with regarding the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, they will really be pushed to their limits, so this game can look as good as it does. With all of that being said though, it can still be frustrating having to sit through long load times. Thankfully, when the game does finally make its way to the PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X or S, this should be fixed, but for the most part, it definitely does get on my nerves from time to time.
Number 5.
Keeping it real, at this point, I'm probably going to go off on a little bit of a tangent and lose some of you here, as I'll be honest and say that I've always been a little bit critical over the Crash Bandicoot series since the first game did appear, as I always looked at it as pretty much a cheap knockoff version of my beloved Donkey Kong Country series that Rare gave us on the good old Super Nintendo. The biased Nintendo fan in me always feels that when it comes to platform adventure games, Nintendo do have the blueprint, and whilst it probably isn't really too fair to compare, it's something that I find difficult not to do, as Nintendo have consistently put out great platform adventure games over the years. Whether it be 2D side scrollers or 3D games, Nintendo for the most part do get it right. So to me, they always do set the bar, and I always have to obviously compare other platform games. Now for me, the special magic and ingredients that Nintendo use in most of their platform adventure games does kind of seem to be missing from this particular game. Even if we start with the music, this game's soundtrack, whilst not terrible, doesn't really hit the same way when listening to a soundtrack in a Nintendo game that you've gotten over the years. Rarely anything stands out to me in this game, and basically doesn't really create that amazing atmosphere that I probably do expect from level to level. Now, one of the next things that I will say is probably the replayability. Most Nintendo platform games do have a great replayability factor in them, where you could easily go back and play levels countless times. Look how many times I've replayed a Donkey Kong Country level even to this day. In Crash Bandicoot 4, after I do complete some of the levels, I'm personally not in no rush to replay that particular level anytime soon, based on some of them feeling more like a chore to complete, especially when you do consider the frustrations that you probably will experience from level to level. Don't get it twisted, some of the levels are really fun in this game, and there are loads of collectibles and time trials for you to revisit all of the levels that you do play, but given how difficult some of the levels are, and especially how long some of the levels do take to complete, after I do get to an end of a level, I'm pretty much waving that level goodbye and probably not going to revisit it anytime soon. Now, probably one of the last points that I do really want to cover is probably down to the game mechanics, which is something that I have mentioned previously in this video, but I personally can't stress how annoying it is to grasp at times. Maybe I'm not used to playing Crash Bandicoot games, but I just feel that with some of the timings to jump from platform to platform, or even attack enemies, always do feel slightly off to me. Whereas in Nintendo games, if I do die where I miss a platform or get hit by an enemy, for the most part it does feel like it's my fault, whereas in this game sometimes it's not always the case, and I always feel like there's nothing that I could have actually done about it. Keeping it real, I do know that this point is probably a little bit far-fetched, and maybe some of the Crash Bandicoot fans will disagree and say that obviously this is not a Nintendo game, but for me personally, there is something special about Nintendo platformers that just give that right balance of replayability and just enjoyment, mixed with the challenge that feels to me a little bit missing from this particular game. All in all, whilst these points do seem a little bit harsh and maybe nitpicky for some of the gamer fans out there, Crash Bandicoot 4 is definitely still a solid adventure game. There is plenty of hours of entertainment to definitely keep you occupied in this game, and for those who like a massive challenge, this game will certainly give you that. With that being said though, this game for me is definitely far from perfect, and someone who didn't really grow up on the franchise like this, I'm always going to be a little bit nitpicky when it comes to the Crash Bandicoot series, because like I say, I'm definitely a die-hard Nintendo fan, and I always do use those particular adventure games as pretty much the standard for me to judge any adventure games moving forward. Anyway peeps, thanks for sitting through this very quick urban gameplay breakdown of my 5 things that I do hate about Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time. If you do agree with me or disagree with me, let me know in the comments below. Hit the subscribe button if you did enjoy this video or you do like the content on this channel, and until next video, we definitely say peace out peeps.
Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button for more cool urban gameplay videos.